Journey Outside by Mary Q. Steele. Chapter 4. Welcome back to Chapter 4. "Come away, grandfather," he pleaded. "Come away. It is so bright, so bright. It is a better place, grandfather. There is green there. Everything is green. A ball of light overhead like a million torches. Come away." "Why, boy, we have a million torches. See, I've lit this one and this one. See how many? I'll light another and another." "Grandfather, it's too many. It's too hot." "Now this is a better place," the old man shouted. "Now this is the brightest place in all the world, and we'll light more torches and more torches." "Grandfather, I'm too hot. I'm on fire. I'm burning, burning, burning," Dilar gasped, and cool hands seized him gently, and a voice said, "Drink, drink." A bowl was pressed to his lips, and he drank something cool and pleasant, and he lay down, slipped into blackness as though he had been swallowed by a willamar. The fishes swam around him, one of them sang in a low, sweet voice, but now they were changing into big furry things with red eyes and bare tails and pointed noses. Their teeth were long and yellow, and one of them spoke suddenly, saying, "Here he is! We have found him at last! Eat his skin! Eat his skin! Eat his skin!" And another one said, "A better place? A better place, a better place." And they came at him, their great teeth scraped over his skin, over his arms and shoulders, and he screamed, and then he heard the woman's voice again, saying, "Be still, be still." And though her touch was agony, the salve she was applying took away the pain shortly, and he slept again. He could not open his eyes. He lay without moving and heard the woman's voice and a man's voice, but could not see them or anything else. "He seems to be mending," the man said, and the woman replied, "Oh, yes, he's young and strong. The fever's nearly gone now, and the blisters are healing. His shoulder and face were the worst, but I am a fair doctor. I think he will soon be good as new." I could wonder where he came from," said the man in an odd tone. There was a long pause, and finally the woman said, "I think he is one of the raft people." The man shouted with laughter. "Ha ha! Oh no, Norna! What an idea! The raft people are only a myth, something made up by grandmothers and grandfathers to tell children on a winter's evening." "He must be," said the woman. "Tell me where else he could come from. Look, this is what he was wearing, fish skin. He reeked of fish, and who else would have such skin so pale that a few hours in the spring sunshine would burn it so? Where it was not burned, it was whiter than milk, whiter than snow. If he had not been by nature dark complexioned, he would have died." Borba growled, "I couldn't believe such a tale. I couldn't. He would have to lead me by the hand and show me the rafts and the river, and even then I doubt that such things could be." "Perhaps he will tell us when he wakes, Borba, if he wants," said the woman's voice, and then there was silence. Dilar lay listening. The talk made his head swim. What did those words mean? Snow, milk, spring. He could understand the rest of their speech, though some of the words sounded slurred and strange. Perhaps he was dreaming the whole thing. Perhaps he was still lying on the raft with Gaimel and the others, never having left. Surely there was no place as this, and no such people. What had happened to him, and why was he here, if this were not a dream? Ah, he was afraid and worried, and by fear and worry made him so tired that once again he drifted off to sleep. "What is this I'm eating?" he asked Dorna. "Eggs," she answered. "Eggs?" he cried. "What kind of fish lay eggs like this?" "Not a fish, silly. A hen," she told him. "A hen? What is a hen?" "A hen is a hen," she said impatiently. "You don't know anything." I don't know what I know," he answered unhappily, but Dorna did not hear. She had turned away and was looking off across the grass. "There," she said, "there by the pear tree. Those things are hens." Dilar lifted his eyes from the fascinating dish of boiled eggs and squinted at the hens. Though he was sitting in deep shade, looking into the light made his eyes water. He stared anyway. He could not resist staring at all these new and wonderful things. Eggs, hens, pots made of iron, cloth woven of sheep's wool, pear trees, butterflies, grass, and weeds. All these things made him gasp in astonishment. And if he lived to be as old as grandfather's grandfather, he would never get over the breathless miracle of the sun and sky. He had not dared yet to look at the sun again, but in the twilight he stood every night to watch its splendor fade from the horizon, to see the stars surface out of the dusk like little gleaming fish, to wait for the moon to rise and hang in space, pale and cool, opening night by night from a silver stalk to a wide white blossom. Now it was beginning to slowly close again. "Now see," said Dorna penitently, looking has made your eyes water, and they are only ugly old hens." "They are beautiful," said Dilar. "It is all beautiful." He wanted to know more about the hens, but he did not ask. These people hardly ever asked questions, and never personal ones. Strangers were always greeted as Dorna had greeted him. "My name is Dorna," so that newcomers might be spared the pain of asking even so much as a name. No one had asked him who he was or where he had come from, and in his turn he tried not to question Norna and Dorna too much. If he did, Dorna quickly grew impatient, and Norna gave him strange looks as though he should know better. Besides, in time he found answers himself, and he felt that was best. He knew that most of his questions must seem foolish as well as rude to Norna and Dorna. He had learned that he was right about green, about logs called trees being alive. He had learned about day and about night, and that there were times called summer, winter, spring, and fall. He could not imagine what they were, nor why Dorna looked discontent when she spoke about winter. "Come," she said now, "we'll go up by the meadows and pick grapes. I know a way that is in the shade, there and back, except for a little bit." "He must wear a hat," said Norna quickly from the doorway, "and I will fix an eye shade for him, and he must keep his arms covered." Dilar hated keeping his arms covered. His sunburn was almost healed, but every day Norna smeared him with lotions and salves, some to heal, some to toughen his skin. Then, when he had put on a long-sleeved shirt she insisted on, the cloth stuck to the greasy salve and clung to his shoulders and his back, and felt horrible to a boy who had never before in his whole life worn anything but a pair of short fish-skin breeches. But he was so anxious to leave his seat under the trees and get out into this beautiful and unbelievable world that he would have endured much worse. Every day he spent so many minutes in the sun. Soon his skin would be whole again, Norna said, and strengthened to stand the touch of the sun without a shirt and all the lotions. But he must wear for a while longer the brimmed hat and the eye shade woven of dried grasses. Norna was worried that he might injure his eyes again. "Skin will replace itself, but eyes won't," she warned. "You'd best take care." Now, swaddled and sweating in his shirt and his salves, Dilar followed Dorna under the fragrant fruit trees along a worn path. Every now and then Dorna stopped to pick a pear or a plum or an apricot and offer it to him. He ate them all. Sometimes it seemed to him that he never did anything but eat. Who could have imagined there were such things to eat? Tomatoes and berries, beans and squash, melons and potatoes and honey, which he could only eat a drop at a time, for its sweetness made tears come to his eyes and his throat close up. Every mouthful he ate astonished and delighted him, who had never before eaten anything but fish and snails and water weeds. Dorna could not help laughing at him, that these simple fruits and vegetables, so commonplace they were not even planted or cultivated, but seeded and cared for themselves in the hedgerows and meadows and wayside ditches, should so fill him with awe, amazed her. She searched every day for something new to give him, to watch his surprise and pleasure at the sight and feel and taste of it. To see him eating his first strawberry was, she said, enough to make a pumpkin laugh. And Dilar said only, "What is a pumpkin?" "Now here is the only place without shade," she told him suddenly. "Shut your eyes and give me your hand. We'll run over there to the shade of those big trees at the top of the slope." Diller squinted up the hill. He recognized this place. With a sudden heart-leaping anguish, he knew that this was the grove of trees he had entered that very first morning in this world. He must have come toward it from the other direction, and down from the mountain there where it was rocky and bare. Someplace up among the stony outcroppings must be the way back to the caves, the tunnel, and the rafts. "Now run!" ordered Dorna, and he ran, squeezing his eyes almost shut and letting her guide him. When they reached the grove, he was panting and sweating. He got hot much more quickly than Dorna or any of these people. "It is better than cold," Dorna always said, and he could not answer her, for he didn't know what cold was. Heat he knew from the fish oil fires and the torches. He had burned himself often enough on a hot bowl of fish stew. But cold? What was cold? Dorna held his hand in the spring that purled up out of the rocks on the mountainside. "That's cold," she said. So he knew what cold was, but he could not imagine cold all around him like a cloak pressing against his face and arms and back the way the heat did. Today, even Dorna complained of the heat and wiped the drops of sweat from her face with a hand stained with plum juice and dust. Suddenly she smiled and waved. "There are Borba and Forlon and Katrin," she said. But the three shepherds did not wave back. Instead, they pretended to be staring off up the mountain and then turned away. Dorna laughed gleefully. "They are playing that they don't see us," she cried. "They are still ashamed because they were frightened of you and threw stones and ran. I wasn't afraid," she boasted. Diller said nothing. He could not blame the shepherds. He had been a terrible sight, naked, blind, crimson, swollen-faced. Had he met such a creature stumbling and wailing in the twilight, he too might have thrown stones. But the tale always reminded him that he owed his life to Dorna and her mother. He wanted to think of some way to repay them, though in truth they had not seemed to suppose that he owed them anything. At the moment, anyway, he had no time to think of it. He kept blinking around, trying to decide where he had come out of the mountainside. The mountain was not as high as the mountains on the other side of the valley, the mountains of the tigers, as Dorna and Norna called them. Sheep grazed almost to the top. There was a pass where they sometimes strayed through and onto the far slope, a gentle pasture falling slowly to the sea, miles away, but very poor and rocky. No one lived there, and even the sheep soon came back home, not liking the few mouthfuls of tough, salty grass they found there. But Diller had come out on this side of the mountain, and though he searched with his eyes all up the slope, he could not see any crack or cave or crevice which might offer an entrance into the depths of the earth. Dorna led the way through the woods till they came to a place where the trees were looped and hung with vines. Bunches of fruit, deep red and blue-green, dangled from the vines. "Not yet ripe," she told Diller. "What do you mean?" he asked, and Dorna struggled to explain. "Not yet old enough to eat," she said, and picked one of the grapes and popped it into his mouth. The tart juice, a fresh, sharp taste, made his mouth draw up a little, and chewed thoughtfully. "Delicious," he said, and Dorna was disgusted. A week later, Diller rose one morning in the first light, when the birds were only stirring, and Dorna and her mother both slept peacefully on their cots. Softly he made his way out of the house without the shirt and the salves and the hat and the sunshade, and took the faint path up the mountainside. He went beyond the thin woods and up the shaly slope he had come down that very first misty morning. He was sure this was the way he had come. Somewhere under his feet curled the river, which had been all his life. Right now, this very minute, below the spot where he stood, the flotilla might be making its slow, dark, futile way back around and around, silent between the walls of rock. "Grandfather!" he cried aloud. "Grandfather! It is day here. It is green. I will come and bring you out into this better place." A bird sang in answer, a clear and fragile sound like water dropping into a pool. But though Dilar searched for 3 hours back and forth along the hillside, till the sun was high in the sky and strong enough to dazzle and burn his eyes, he found no crack, nor cave, nor crevice that might let anyone in or out of the heart and veins of that mountain. And that is the end of chapter 4. Next time we'll be on to chapter 5.